Back for another week at the NASCAR Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Blacker. Last week, we're not going to spend a ton of time harping on it. We had a 3-2 week. We hit two top 10, so that would be Chris Buescher and Michael McDowell, finished 10th and 7th. AJ Allmendinger, top 5, didn't even come close. Tyler Reddick didn't even come close. And then we hit the matchup. Chase Elliott over Kyle Larson. Chase finished 4th. Larson finished 4th. Winner of the race was a guy, Shane Van Gisbergen, 34-year-old guy from New Zealand. It was his first NASCAR race. He was a bomb. Saw him some places 30-1, 35-1. The story of the Chicago road course, from a handicapping perspective, there were two lessons we learned. One, a street course and a road course, the guys that do good on road courses excel on street courses. It's reflected by the speed ratings. It's reflected by the finishes. It was a sound decision to equate those two and go from there. And foreshadowing a little this week, there's an interesting, track comparison we need to look at. But I digress. And then the second thing is, and this is true with any sport, guy drops a pass, guy misses a 2-foot putt, weird things happen. This is a weird thing that happened. Usually in NASCAR, when weird things happen, a guy runs out of gas, a guy fails inspection, which rarely, if ever, happens. Tire blows up. There's a crash that the guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time. This thing was a decision by NASCAR officials about 45 laps into the race to shorten the race from 100 laps to 75 laps. Why does that matter from a betting perspective? It matters a lot because a bunch of guys who were outside the top 12 decided to pit around lap 45 and 46. They pitted, they got fuel and tires. Then around lap 50 or 48, 49 or 50, in that ballpark, NASCAR announced it was going from 75 to 100. The guys that pitted 3 laps earlier, they wouldn't have made it to 100, but they were going to make it to 75. So what happened was the guys who were still on the track, they were going to go to a lap, if it was a 100-lap race, they were going to go to lap about 62, 63, hit, and they'd make it to the end. So the track position that they lost with those guys short pitting early, they would have made up if it went 100 laps. Because it went 75 laps, they ran out of time. Everyone says, and the speed ratings reflect it, 2 fastest cars, Kyle Larson and Chris Bell. Either of them won. Van Gisbergen was fast, but like Justin Haley wasn't a top 10 car. Justin Haley who finished second, is usually a back marker most weeks. He was in the right place at the right time. He made a pitting decision, and then he kept his position. Guys couldn't pass him. Speaking of the Elliott-Larson matchup, Chase Elliott is a great road course racer. We looked at his metrics last week. He's dominant. He's good. We got super lucky if you followed that. And so if you took that early, you got him at -140. If you took him after practice and qualifying, you got him at a plus number because he started towards the back of the field. He had a backup vehicle. Kyle Larson started in front of him. Kyle Larson was better than him, but we got lucky, right? Because Chase Elliott was on a different pit strategy. He pitted early, and Kyle Larson just couldn't get by him. Kyle Larson drove through the field to 4th. He couldn't get to 3rd. We cash. Speaking of Buescher and McDowell, we got them at plus money last week. After practice and qualifying, and even later in the week, they were -140, 150, 160. Same with Allmendinger. Allmendinger kept coming down even after we recorded. So kind of on the right side of that, if you want to say so. I liked Reddick over Elliott on my podcast picks just because of value. As it turned out, after practicing qualifying, Chase Elliott was 15-1. Then he became a play. I didn't play him, but I would have played him then. But that's a perfect example. And if you look at the board this week, there's nobody less than 10-1. So that's going to change after practicing qualifying. Guys, there'll be somebody, the poll guy will be 6.5, 7-1. So it's important. So to, know when to go early, know when to go late, and just kind of have that feel. And we'll try to help you through that. So this week we're going to Atlanta. It's the Quaker State 400, and it's 400 miles, 260 laps around their newly repaved and reconfigured 1.54 mile oval. Stages are as follows: 60 laps, first stage. Stage 2, 100 laps. Final stage, stage 3, 100 laps. So there'll be stage cautions this week. So if you think of it, the first stage, they'll be able to get towards the end in the fuel window and tires. If it stays green, they'll be able to get towards the end without pitting. Stages 2 and 3, they'll have to split the stages in half, right? Pit at 50. But looking at the last 3 runnings of this race, there'll be plenty of cautions. There'll be plenty of cautions. Prior to 2022, the 7 runnings of this race before, it averaged 4.7 cautions. The last 3 runnings of the race, now the spring race this year had 5 cautions, so that's a little bit above the average. But if you have a competition caution and you have a couple other, you have stage breaks. So there are really only 2 yellow flags, which was a super clean race in the spring. But last year in the spring, there were 11 cautions. In this race, the summer race, 13 cautions. So even if you take out the competition and the 2 stage breaks, there were still 10 cautions in this race. 10, which is twice as much, more than twice as much as the average of 4.7. So of the previous 7. And they didn't have the competition caution until a couple of years ago. So that's one that, they don't generally have in terms of those metrics. So again, the argument this week is, what's the comp tracks for Atlanta? As handicappers, we like to look at performances, see how guys do on certain tracks. This track, for a lot of different reasons, we're equating to a super speedway, which NASCAR purists would say has to be 2.0 miles or more. So that's Daytona and Talladega. But this track's only 1.4. But because of the 28-degree banking, on the turns, and the restrictor plates in the cars, which are only seen at super speedways, and the fact that Goodyear is using its super speedway radial tire, we're treating it as a super speedway. So what does that mean? That means guys that do well at super speedways, it's an acquired skill. These super speedway races have lots of wrecks. Do you wait for the big one? There's lots of carnage. Yeah, as we alluded to earlier, there's guys that could be in the wrong place at the wrong time and get caught up in a wreck. But as the sample sizes get bigger, you can also see guys that know how to drive at super speedways with restrictor plates, and guys that have driven well in Atlanta that know how to kind of stay patient, stay out of the trouble. If you look at Daytona is a comp track to this. Michael McDowell, Austin Cindric, Ricky Stenhouse. Those are guys that aren't at the top of the markets all the time. They've all won Daytona. How have they won Daytona? It was a caution fest. They were the last ones standing. They stayed out of trouble. They were patient. Their pit crews made the right calls. So that's why in this race, if you look at the markets, even in the top 10 markets at some places, everyone, with few exceptions, is plus money, which you rarely see in a NASCAR race. Usually the top guys like Kyle Larson on a cookie cutter track or a short track, and William Byron, they're minus 300. top 10. This week, those guys have a plus next to their name. Why? Because there's going to be carnage. There's a lot of unknown and uncertainty in these races. So there's a guy this week who's an X factor we'll talk about later named Austin Hill. Austin Hill is riding the 62 card for Beard Motorsports. Austin Hill is a regular in the Xfinity series where he is, and you know what? I didn't do my research. I don't think he won the Xfinity title last year, but he was in the Final Four. Anyway, he's great at the Xfinity series. And he's great at Atlanta Motor Speedway in the Xfinity series. The guy has 2 wins and a third in 3 starts at Atlanta since the repaving in the last 3 in the Xfinity series. We think that'll translate over just because of his patience and his ability. And the markets are going to adjust to him through practice and qualifying, but as we'll see later, good value on a guy like Austin Hill. So trying to see if there's any other notes before we get going. Not really. So we're gonna my wife said last night she watched the thing last week. She said, I must have said it. Street course, road course are the same a million times. I'm gonna say Atlanta and the super speedway are the same a million times. And as gamblers, we've got to drill that into our heads when we handicap. So we're going to go ahead and look at some metrics here. So performance chart at Atlanta, last 10. Hottest driver in the series, MTJ, Martin Truex, 7.5, no wins. Keselowski, 2 wins here, 9.2 average finish. So if you look, there's only 2 guys in the last 10 that are averaging a top 10 finish. Kyle Busch, 7 top 10s, 4 top 5, 10.4. Kevin Harvick, a guy who wink, wink, nod, nod, we like this week. And he's on his farewell tour. It was already announced that Josh Berry will be in the Stewart-Haas number 4 car next year. So Harvick's done, up to the TV booth. Farewell tour. He's had success at this track. We love him this week. 2 wins, 3 top 5s, 6 top 10s, 10.8. Chase Elliott, last week, a lot of conspiracy theorists said that, they were hypothesizing or guessing that, it was set up for him to win since he had pitted early, whatever. He didn't get it done. Really doesn't hurt him, though, because the guy that won doesn't get playoff points, so it doesn't knock him out. But because of his injury, he probably has to win a race. He's got some opportunities coming up later with road courses, which we'll talk about, in future episodes. But I think that he does well at Atlanta. Ryan Blaney, who everyone loves this week, and you'll see why on later graphics. A win, 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s, 11.6. Pagano, who won the race here in the spring, 12.7 average finish. Denny Hamlin, 15.1. Kyle Larson, Young Money, 15.9. Thing with Larson is every week, and it wasn't true last week on the road course. He actually exceeded expectations, but his value is just the books are just so, they don't want to have liability on him. So he's priced very tight and very short. As we'll see, there's very little value on him. Okay, laps led in Atlanta. Look at this. So last 10, Kevin Harvick. Almost twice as many laps as the next guy. Harvick, Larson, Logano, Elliott, Keselowski. Laps led the last 3 in Atlanta. William Byron and Logano are tied. Chase, Chastain, and Keselowski. So again, in our plays, especially the super speedway setup, we're not, outrights are just a crapshoot. We're looking for top 10s, top 5s. That's what we, tend to go for, especially with a lot of plus money this week. There's value to be had there. You're not laying a ton of juice, on a top 10. So we like that. So we're not necessarily, laps led is important, but not crazy important. And then in the last 3 at Atlanta, look at Chase. So Chase has only run he's run 2 of the last 3. He didn't run spring race because he was injured. But, 3.5 Chastain. Eric Jones is a guy we're going to talk about. We like him. 8.7. Ty Gibbs. It's just the spring. He didn't race the cup races last year. 9. Blaney, 9.7. LaJoy, 10. We like LaJoy, patient driver. Guys like a Corey LaJoy and Eric Jones and Noah Gragson, who's not on this chart, are guys that there's very few spots where they have a chance to do well. This is one of the spots. They do well on super speedways, and all those guys also have something in common in that they're on pretty underfunded teams, but the equipment in this case, in terms of it's more of a balance. I feel in my modeling and my handicapping of driver skill when it comes to these super speedways. So all those guys are on, you would say, lower market teams. Logano 12, Truex 12.7, Daniel Suarez 13. The last 3 in Atlanta finish chart. Now we're going to look at speeds. No, we're going to look at points. I'm sorry. So look at Truex, Blaney. So points are awarded at the end of every stage for being in the top 10. Then there's bonus points for wins, obviously. So if you look at the last 10, Truex, Blaney, Busch, Harvick, our man, has done well. The reason number 5 is missing is it's Kurt Busch. He's not racing this year. He's retired. Denny Hamlin, Logano, Elliott, Larson, and Bowman. So, and then the last 3 races we're looking, and again, that Chase has got 100 points in 2 races. So that's pretty good. Blaney, Chastain, another guy. Chastain's just too aggressive for our liking here at this track. I don't like him this week. Joey Logano, who won the spring race. And then a guy, Eric Jones, who we do like this week, who just hangs around, keeps it clean, and he's there. And then the speed ratings, Atlanta 1 speed rating. So if you look at this kind of illustrates the point that more so than at other weeks, fastest car doesn't always win. Austin Cindric was the fastest car in the spring, finished 11th. Martin Truex crashed. Tied for second fastest car. He finished 19th. But then Joey Logano was fast. He won. Chris Bell's always there. Always there. He finished 3rd. And then Corey LaJoy finished 4th, and he was 5th fastest. So, and then if you look at the speed ratings for the season, you look at the guys, the top 5, William Byron, Truex, those guys are at the top of the standings. Fast car, good finishes, lots of wins. It all comes together. Kyle Larson's up there, Seabell's up there, Denny Hamlin's up there. If you look at Blaney, who is short this week, he's short price this week. Logano, not super fast. So if you look at the Fords, that's one thing we didn't touch on. Ford has won 6 of the past plus of 9 races. 6 of the last 9 runnings, they've won. So that's Penske, and that's RFK, which is Roush, Fenway, Keselowski, and Buescher, and that's Front Row Motorsports, which has Michael McDowell. So, and then the Penske stable is Austin Cindric, it's Ryan Blaney, and it's Joey Logano. So those guys. So look at Corey LaJoy, Spire Motorsports, down there at 29th. He doesn't have a fast car every week. He doesn't have the equipment. Eric Jones in the Legacy Motorsports, 43. Doesn't have a fast car every week. But these guys can jump up in certain weeks and perform well. They're not going to be up there every week, but those drivers can certainly perform well. So if you look at that, that's not to scare anybody off of these guys, because you got to weigh it. We go to this one up here, Corey LaJoy, performance, in the last three, 2 top 5s, 2 top 10s, right? 2 top 5s, 2 top 10s. But this year's speed rating, it was fast at Atlanta, but it's slow on the season. So, again, it's all about measuring it and how you weight certain factors in your handicapping, which is true with any sport and any modeling procedure. All right, so plays for the week. Guys we like a lot. Austin Hill, plus 275 at Barstool. And I'm going to go to Racing Reference, and I'm going to show you, actually, I misspoke. Look at Austin Hill's performances in Atlanta, in the Xfinity Series. Second, win-win. Came from 14th to go second, right? Fifth to first, third to first. At plus 275, I'm taking him, and I'm taking him heavy. I just think he's a guy that's going to be there towards the end. Now, he's in a no-name car and a no-name team. Nobody's going to do him any favors. But as you'll see in this race, there's a lot of drafting. There's a lot of, the left lane, the left line, the right line, the inside line, outside line. Who has the most energy? These guys make friends real fast out there. On restarts, usually the Fords go together or the Chevys or Toyotas, whatever. But if it's late in a race and a guy, needs help, they're going to help Austin Hill, because the faster Austin Hill goes, they could tip out and go by him type thing. So nobody's not going to help somebody, even a Chastain, who's the bad boy of the series. So that's another dynamic you have here with the double file restarts and a super speedway. There's a lot of drafting. So I'll never forget a couple years ago at Talladega, I'm sitting in my garage smoking a cigar, and Eric Jones is leading the race, 2 laps to go. And my son, who's standing opposite the cigar smoke, says, "Daddy, Eric Jones is going to win this race." And I said, "There's 20 guys I could tell you are going to win this race. It's not going to be Eric Jones." That's the thing with the super speedway. If you're ahead, you're a sitting duck. These guys come off the corners, they get so much momentum. You can block one car, you can't block two. So there's so much strategy. There's so much being in the right place at the right time. If you go on YouTube and you look at the Daytona 500 finishes, the one Cindric won, the one McDowell won, and even Stenhouse, they didn't lead a lot of laps. They had a fast car. They kept it clean, and then they were in the right place at the right time at the end to get the checkered flag. So again, looking at Austin Hill, that's one thing. If you look, and this is Harvick's last 10 races, here in Atlanta. He crashed out at wrong place, wrong time kind of crash. He qualified pretty well, had a good car in the spring. End of that second stage, actually the start of the third stage, was involved in a multi-vehicle crash. He crashed. I mean, he starts well, which isn't a huge deal at these places, but I mean, I wouldn't let the subpar finishes. He didn't have a great 21 last year, right around the top 10. I like him this week. I know there's past history that's good, and I know that, Stuart Haas is also good too. We failed to mention before as well, those guys being in Fords too. So him and Chase Briscoe and the rest of Stuart Haas, Ryan Preece, the 41, the other guy. So again, we like that. And then if you look, another thing we look at too is just restrictor plate races. So now these races only take into account Daytona and Talladega. So Bubba Wallace is a guy who, not great at Atlanta. He's a good restrictor plate racer. But if you look at guys here, Harvick's right up there. And, Austin Dillon's another guy. Again, you can't bet them all. I wouldn't fault anyone for taking him this week. I like Blaney this week. The guys I don't like this week necessarily are, and I'm going down deep, my eyes are going down, is a Larson and a Byron. I'm fading them this week, and they're kind of at the top of the market. They may qualify well, and they're just, I just I don't fancy their chances at all this week. So I like Austin Hill, I like Corey LaJoy, and I like Kevin Harvick. I would jump on all these numbers early, because maybe with the exception of Hill, and if you look, Barstool, Caesars, FanDuel, I shopped all of them, and those are the best prices I find. If you tell me Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney, I could get it at more, almost, well, over $2.50 Keselowski and a shade under it for Blaney, I'm not walking to the window. I'm running to the window. I love those two plays. The reason we're not doing a win bet is we're essentially going to, at plus money, plus 155, we're going to get everybody in the Ford stable to, if one of them wins, we win, right? Top manufacturer, they're going to have to win the race. Logano, Blaney, Harvick, are guys that certainly, are going to be up there in Ford equipment. But Cindric is a guy. I don't like him that much, but, look, Ford's won 6 of the last 9 races at this track. So, and then I really like Harvick, kind of on the Harvick train at plus money over Chris Bell. Chris Bell's solid, but again, Kevin Harvick, I just think it's kind of, farewell tour. Guy is, past winner at a lot of places, but he, at Atlanta as well, and he's going to really try to go out with a bang. So those are my plays there. I'm going 3 top 10s, 2 top 5s, the prop bet, Ford being the top manufacturer. Toyota was enticing because Toyota was high. They're $3.80, $3.80 to 1. But and then Chevy's minus money. I think there's a lot of Elliott love at the top of the board and a lot of Kyle Busch love at the top of the board. I'm taking Ford, not just from a value standpoint, but I think it's a solid play. Pretty high likelihood of it coming in. So it's high likelihood as you can have in gambling. So those are my plays for this week. And we'll be at it again next week. Just going to next week's actually, it's a home game for me. It's at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway. So they call that the Miracle Mile, and it's a great race. I'll be in attendance at that race. So actually I practice in qualifying and the race. So that's exciting. They come up here, a lot more NASCAR fans than you think here in the New England area where I'm based. So good luck to everyone this week. Let me know if I can be of assistance. My Twitter handle is @RossBlacker. You can DM me or hit me up there for any advice. And I wish everybody luck this week. I think it's going to be, prime time race on USA, 7 p.m. And it should be exciting. I wasn't in love with the Chicago Street Course race, maybe because I kind of got screwed on my guys. I kind of backdoored into 2 wins, especially Buescher, top 10, finishing 10th. And then Chase Elliott had no business beating Larson, but he did. We're not giving it back. You never give them back. So, but hopefully this week, another exciting week, and everyone cashes. A lot of new NASCAR fans out there. The NASCAR betting community is growing. So excited to be a part of it. I've been doing this for a long time before it became popular and a novelty, but great sport. Love it every week. A lot of intricacies, a lot of variables, but hopefully everyone does well in Atlanta, and we'll see you next week.